Botswana is a country located in the center of southern Africa. The territory is roughly triangular, approximately 600 miles, 965 kilometers, from north to south and 600 miles from east to west, with its eastern side protruding into a sharp point. Its eastern and southern borders are marked by river courses and an old wagon road. Its western borders are lines of longitude and latitude through the Kalahari, and its northern borders combine straight lines with a river course. Within the confines of Botswana's borders is a rich variety of wildlife, including many species of mammals, birds, reptiles, amphibians, and fish. Before its independence in 1966, Botswana was a British protectorate known as Bechuanaland. It was also one of the poorest and least developed states in the world. The country is named after its dominant ethnic group, the Tswana, Bechuana, an older variant orthography. Since its independence, the Republic of Botswana has gained international stature as a peaceful and increasingly prosperous democratic state. Botswana is bounded by Namibia to the west and north, the Caprivi Strip, Zambia and Zimbabwe to the northeast, and South Africa to the southeast and south. The Zambezi River border with Zambia is only several hundred yards long. The border along the main channel of the Chobe River up to the Zambezi was disputed with Namibia until a 1999 ruling by the International Court of Justice favored Botswana. The point at which the borders of Botswana, Namibia, Zambia, and Zimbabwe meet in the middle of the river has never been precisely determined. Botswana extends from the Chobe River, which drains through the Zambezi to the Indian Ocean, in the north to the Moloko River, part of the Orange River system, which flows into the Atlantic, in the south. To the east, it is bordered by the Limpopo River and its tributaries, the Ngatwain, Mtwani, Mariko, Madikwe, and Shash. The country is divided into three main environmental regions. The Hardbelt region consists of rocky hill ranges and areas of shallow sand cover in eastern Botswana. The Sandbelt region is the area of deep Kalahari sand covering the rest of the country. The third region consists of ancient lake beds superimposed on the northern Sandbelt in the lowest part of the Kalahari basin. Drainage through the marshes of the Okavango Delta is complex and imperfectly understood. The perennial Okavango River runs southward into its delta across the Caprivi Strip from the highlands of Angola. Most of its water evaporates from the 4,000 square miles, 10,000 square kilometers, of the delta wetlands. Floodwater reaches down through the eastern side of the marshes to the Bateti River, which flows sporadically to Lake Dow and the Makgatikgadi Pans, also roughly 4,000 square miles in area. Less and less water flowed through the western side of the Okavango marshes during the 20th century, so that the 70-square-mile Lake Ngami, famous a century ago, is today dry and almost unrecognizable as a lake. Meanwhile, the eastern Makgatikgadi Pans are flooded annually by the otherwise ephemeral Nata River from the Zimbabwe highlands, while the southern tributaries of the Pans are now dry fossil valleys. The Moloko River and its Ramatlabama tributary, on the southern border of Botswana with a course flowing into the Orange River, today rarely flood more than 50 miles from their sources. Most rivers in Botswana are ephemeral channels, usually not flowing above ground except in the summer rainy season. The two great exceptions to this rule are vigorous channels fed by the rains of Central Africa, the Okavango River above its delta, and the Chobe River flowing through its marshes along the northern border to join the Zambezi above the Victoria Falls. The annual climate ranges from months of dry temperate weather during winter to humid subtropical weather interspersed with drier periods of hot weather during summer. In summer, which lasts from October to March, temperatures rise to about 93 degrees Fahrenheit, 34 degrees centigrade, in the extreme north and southwest, the warmest parts of the country. In winter, which lasts from April to September, there is frequent frost at night, and temperatures may fall to near freezing in some high-altitude areas during the day. Summer is heralded by a windy season, the winds carrying dust from the Kalahari, from about late August to early October. Annual rainfall, brought by winds from the Indian Ocean, averages 460 millimeters, representing a range from 635 millimeters in the extreme northeast to less than 127 millimeters in the extreme southwest. The rains are almost entirely limited to summer downpours between December and March, which also mark the season for plowing and planting. Cyclic droughts, often lasting up to 5 or 6 years every 2 decades, can limit or eliminate harvests and reduce livestock to starvation. The Kalahari Sandbelt has often been called thirstland to distinguish it from the true desert. Even in its southwestern corner, where there are some bare sand dunes, the vegetation is more characteristic of dry steppe than desert. The general vegetation of the country is savanna grassland with yellow or light brown grass cover, turning green after rains, and woody plants. The savanna ranges from acacia shrub savanna in the southwest through acacia thornbush and tree savanna parkland into denser woodland, and eventually forest as one moves north and east. Croton and Combretum tree savanna is found on the rocky hills of the eastern Hardbelt. Acacia tree savanna merges northward into Mopane, African ironwood, savanna woodland. Mopane woodland covers most of the northern and eastern third of the country, with the exception of the open grasslands immediately surrounding the Okavango Delta and Makgetakgadi Pans. Animal life is extremely varied in a thirstland environment. About 150 species of mammals are found in Botswana. These range from 30 species of bats and 27 rodents to more than 30 species of large mammals. Bird life is prolific, with more than 460 species. Botswana has a great variety of reptiles and amphibians, of which more than 200 species have been described in detail. The principal fish in the rivers of the north are tilapia, African bream, catfish, and the tigerfish, which is famous for its ferocious resistance to being caught on a line. There are several national parks and game reserves in Botswana, including the Central Kalahari Game Reserve, the largest reserve in the country and home to such animals as lions, black-backed jackals, elephants, foxes, ostriches, springboks, and zebras. Others include Chove National Park, the Makgetakgadi Pans Game Reserve, and the Galagadi Transfrontier Park, a conservation area jointly managed by Botswana and South Africa. The dominant ethnic identity in Botswana is Tswana, comprising some 2/3 of the population in the 21st century. The country's whole population is characterized as Botswana, singular Mtswana, whatever their ethnic origin. Tswana ethnic dominance, Tswanadom, in Botswana can be dated to the 8 Tswana states, which ruled most of the area in the 19th century. Under British colonial rule, the populations of these states were given the official status of tribes, a term still used today. White settlement in Botswana, consisting of some Afrikaners and fewer English settled in border farms, totaled fewer than 3,000 people in the colonial period. The number of whites in Botswana, while showing some increase since independence, still accounts for only a very small portion of the total population. Botswana is also home to a small population of Asian or mixed ancestry. The national language, Tswana, Setswana, Setswana, is widely spoken. The official language is English. The Khoisan speak languages characterized as Ko, or Kwi, and San. Several other languages are also spoken in the country, including Kalanga, Sitgalagadi, Herero, Mukushu, and Ye. About 1/2 of the country's population is Christian, predominantly independent Christian, with some Protestant. Some 1/3 adhere to traditional beliefs as their primary religious orientation. Christianity was introduced during the colonial era by missionaries from the south such as David Livingstone, and was established as the official religion of the 8 Tswana states by the end of the 19th century. Some indigenous religious and medical practices, notably respect for patriarchal ancestors, were assimilated within popular Christian beliefs. Botswana has a free market economy with a strong tradition of central government planning to provide infrastructure for private investment. The economy has grown rapidly since the mid-1960s, with the gross domestic product per capita increased more than 100-fold. Relatively few rural households benefit from cattle sales, almost half of them have no cattle, and less than 1/10 own about half of the country's cattle, averaging 100 head each. Few households produce enough crops to cover even their own subsistence, let alone to sell on the market. Many rural households survive on the income of a family member in town or abroad. That still leaves a significant number of rural households, usually female-headed, with no source of income known to statisticians. State revenues reaped from mining development have been spent on basic rural infrastructure and welfare services, and on schemes to subsidize the development of cattle and crop production, which have in general benefited the richer rural households. Trade unions have had limited success penetrating the paid employment sector in Botswana. Very little of Botswana's land is suitable for productive cultivation. Agricultural output constitutes less than 1/10 of the gross national product, and most of that is in the form of livestock production for urban and export markets. Grain production, mostly sorghum, millet, and corn maize, fell short of national consumption for most of the 20th century, and foodstuffs from South Africa and Zimbabwe are some of Botswana's major import commodities. Fishing and forestry production is limited, and largely confined to the extreme north. Botswana is traditionally seen as a cattle country. Given sufficient water and pasture and controls on the spread of foot and mouth disease from wetland buffalo, it is a healthy environment for raising high-bulk, high-quality indigenous beef cattle. The government has invested heavily in disease prevention, modern slaughterhouses, and support services for cattle producers. Various schemes so far unsuccessful have been attempted to improve range management. Meanwhile, access to Botswana's main export market for beef, the European Union, improved with the reduction of levies and tariffs in the early 21st century. Diamonds, the major economic resource of the country, have been exploited on a large scale since 1970. They are mined from some of the world's largest diamond pipes at Arapa and Letlakane, south of the Makgedik Pans, and Achwaning in the southeastern Sandville. Nickel and copper have been mined at Salebi Fikwa near the Motlets River since 1974. Coal is mined for power generation at Morapil near Palapi. Botswana's other major proven mineral resources are salt and soda ash, which was fully exploited at Suwa on the eastern Makgedik Pans from 1991. Industrial development in Botswana has been limited by the high costs of power and water, the lack of appropriate management and labor skills, and the small domestic market. Manufacturing activity up to the 1980s largely consisted of meat processing at Lobits in the south. In the early 1980s, capital and textile production were transferred from Zimbabwe to nearby Francistown in Botswana, and diamond sorting and service industries grew in the booming capital city, Gaborone. The growth of the diamond industry continued in the following decades, and in 2008 De Beers SA established a sophisticated diamond sorting and valuing facility in Gaborone, which at the time of its opening was the world's largest and most sophisticated plant of its kind. The Bank of Botswana is the central bank and issues the national currency, the pula. The Botswana economy is regulated by the central bank and a strong Ministry of Finance and Development Planning. There are multinational commercial banks with branch operations that extend to the village level. Botswana has had the unusual problems, for a developing country, of a government budget surplus running into billions of dollars and excess capital lying unutilized in private banks. The budget surplus and bank liquidity were partially depleted by diversion into a construction boom in the late 1980s and early 90s, including infrastructure for new mining operations and military airports. A small stock exchange has been set up. The economy, from diamonds to nickel copper to soda ash and construction, remains dominated by De Beers South Africa. Tourists are attracted to Botswana by relatively unpopulated and remote wetland and thirstland environments. Government policy is to limit the density and environmental impact of tourism through licensing of a limited number of high-cost safari companies. Domestic trade patterns within Botswana are dominated by large, mostly foreign-owned wholesale operations and large foreign retailers in urban areas, though there is also an increasing proliferation of small stores owned by citizens. Botswana sends some of its exports to other southern African countries, but most of its exports are sent to the world market beyond Africa, mainly to Europe. It takes about 3/4 of its imports from its neighbors. Imports consist of machinery and transport equipment, food products, and consumer goods, often manufactured or serviced by multinational companies based in South Africa. Other imports from the rest of the world consist largely of high-technology equipment. Botswana has a very good transport system network in the region. The 400-mile railway along the eastern side of the country was completed in 1897, linking South Africa and Zimbabwe, but of limited impact on the Botswana economy until the 1970s, when the first branch lines were opened to serve mining areas. At independence in 1966, there were only a few miles of paved roads all inside town boundaries. Since then, the major towns have been linked by paved main highways. Most of the Sandville, however, is accessible only to four-wheel drive vehicles. International air traffic in Botswana, though dating to 1919, was limited until the opening up of the Sir Seretse Khama Airport at Gaborone in 1984. Gaborone is now served by British and French airlines, as well as by regional airlines and the national parastatal airline, Air Botswana. The cultural life of Botswana reflects the dual heritage and intermingling of Tswana and English cultural domination. The two languages and cultures are subtly mixed and alternated in urban and official situations. Western dress has been general among people in Botswana, except at the poorest level, since the late 19th century. Rites of burial, marriage, and birth have been adapted to Christianity and remain extremely important in Botswana life. Football, soccer, is the national sport, played on fields and in stadiums across the country every Saturday. Common diet and cuisine consist of sorghum and corn porridge, beans and other pulses, and traditional spinach, supplemented by tomatoes, potatoes, onions, and cabbage, usually purchased from stores. Meat consumption has become more common with the opening of small butcheries selling beef. Traditional foods include dried fane caterpillars from Mopane woodland, eaten as relish or snacks, fruits such as the wild morla plum, and beer made from sorghum or millet. There is a national museum and art gallery in Gaborone, and an increasing number of district museums founded by local community initiatives. A national learned and scientific society, the Botswana Society, holds regular lectures and publishes an annual journal and books. The government issues a free daily newspaper, mostly in English, and runs television and radio stations, mostly in Tswana and English. There are also several separate private weekly newspapers, with circulation in eastern towns, and private local television stations, mostly relaying broadcasts from neighboring countries. There is no government censorship. During the 1980s, 3 multinational publishers set up branches to generate published materials for schools. Botswana is well known for diamond production as well as tourism in Africa. Many people from across the world visit this beautiful country year-round to experience its natural wonders and many wildlife animals. It is indeed a peaceful and welcoming country with rich cultural diversity and a beaming industry.